Hey guys, how you doing? Welcome to the video. Welcome to my garage. In this video, we're going to go over some paint ideas I have for Wratchet. I'm going to show you what I've got going on the rear axles for now. And I've got a parts list for Wratchet with costs. I've got part numbers and costs on here. So we're going to go over that as well. So I've got a paint style that I've had for years on my radio controlled cars, and this is it. It's a fluorescent yellow on the front. It's just a real base blue on the back, and then you can see in the middle the two overlap and it kind of transitions into a green, which I think is really cool. Now I want to try to replicate this if possible on Wratchet. I'm unclear as to whether or not I'm going to go with fluorescent yellow on the front. I am starting to order some small amounts of paints so that I can do some experimenting. I would like your guys' feedback on that. If you have any ideas on certain types of paints that are bright. The fluorescent yellow works really well on a radio controlled car. On Wratchet, I want him to be bright and I want him to catch some attention. I don't want to go too far. I'm a little bit afraid that the fluorescent might go too far, but most of the colors I'm ordering now to experiment with are not fluorescents. They're just really bright yellows or greens, kind of a mixture between the two. It'll be similar to this. It won't have the checkerboard here. It'll just be, you know, the yellow, blue with the green transition in the middle. But because I don't want it to be too bright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition the blue a little bit farther up. So it'll be the yellow, whether it be fluorescent or like a lime green or whatever color I end up going with. It'll be the yellow green up front, or it'll be the yellow up front, probably about to the front clip. And then I'll start transitioning at the front clip. As a matter of fact, I'll probably transition a little bit into the front clip so that there's not so much, like if I do end up going with a fluorescent yellow, there'll be less just pure intense fluorescent yellow. It'll be more of this transition because the blue that I'm going to use in the back won't be fluorescent. It'll just be a relatively bright blue of some sort. So I'll pull more of that forward so that there's less yellow. But that's kind of going to depend on what yellow I end up going with. So real quick here on Wratchet's rear axles. This is the U-joint that failed. This is a 1310 U-joint, and these are all store-bought pieces that go together, and this spline went into the axle for the other side that went into the hub. This yoke was the piece that broke. It's clearly the weak link in my axle. This part right here is actually really thin. That's the part that broke off when I was at the track. Now, what I've done since then is I've done a really intense internet search on CV stub axles that will go in the Toyota 4Runner hubs. And as it turns out, I found some. I couldn't find any before, but that company, RCV, makes CV axles for all sorts of vehicles. And as it turns out, they now make one for the Toyota 4Runner, which is sweet because that's what these hubs are. They're from a Toyota 4Runner. So they have stub axles that go in there. They're chromoly, and they fit, I believe, 930 CVs. I don't have them yet because when I went to order them, it's like a 16-week lead time. They're out of stock right now. So I'm working diligently on securing those, and then I'll have 930 CVs on the transaxle, and then I'll measure up my axle and I'll get that all measured up. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to go that route, but it's looking like that's going to take months to come to fruition. So I'm just at the point now where I have ordered those stub axles, but like I said, they're 16 weeks out. And then once they're in stock, I'll collect the rest of the pieces and I'll build that. But that's a long way out. So at the hub end here, this is the stub axle in there is from a Jeep Rubicon, or just a Jeep. And it's chromoly, and it's using what is called a 5-760X U-joint. It's a little bit stronger, it's a little bit beefier than just a regular 1310 U-joint. And what it does is, I can't hold this light and get in there at the same time. The stronger part, I mean the U-joint itself is stronger, but this part here is thicker than the 1310 stub shaft or yoke I was using before. So I believe that this side of the axle was much stronger than the other. So what I did is I purchased those components. It's really it's really hard to get in there. Okay. So I purchased those components and I custom welded everything. There's a lot of custom welding going on in there, which is a little bit sketchy. I don't love that, but now that I know that I'm just going to be running on this until I get the CV axles, I'm not as concerned with it. But regardless, so now the inside here, rather than using the 1310 U-joints, it's using the 5-760X, and it's using the yokes for that as well. So I'm hoping that this is stronger and that this will buy me the time I need so that I can keep playing with Wratchet while I'm sourcing those parts for the CV axles. So in a nutshell, I've beefed up the axle a little bit, but I'm sourcing the parts to get everything CV axles in there, and it should all be chromoly and hopefully really, really strong. I mean, at least as strong as a 930 can be, so we'll see how that goes. Then another thing that happened is last weekend I had Wratchet in the local car show, which was a lot of fun. Lots of people asking questions, lots of people interested in the build, things like that. Obviously, a lot of kids enjoy Wratchet, and when the kids come up, I always let them climb in and, you know, sit in the driver's seat, kind of experience it a little bit, hoping to plant the seed in their brain of off-roading and stuff like that. So the car show was a lot of fun, and I entered Wratchet in what they call the specialty class, specialty vehicles, and he actually won a trophy. I think they just hand these out for the top three. It doesn't have a first, second, or third or anything, but he got a trophy. I don't know how many vehicles were in his class. There was 330 cars at the car show, but regardless, it was cool getting called and getting to go pick up a trophy for Wratchet. So he technically has already won he's already won a trophy. So that was a lot of fun. But regardless, let's go over this parts list and the cost breakdown. All right, so here is my parts list. I'll have a link to this in the description. It'll be in my shared file. You guys can access this anytime you want. You'll notice on the bottom there's multiple tabs on this. What I'm going to start doing is just creating this like master file, and it'll have this parts list with the costs, and it'll have my wiring pinout for the Infinity ECU that I'm running on here. It'll also have plug numbers for the Ecotech that I have in Mahler, because actually a lot of those pins are on this engine as well. Like the coils have the same plugs, the fuel injectors have the same plugs. There's quite a lot of parts on there that work the same, so I put that on there as well. I'm also going to create a spec sheet that's going to have Wratchet's wheelbase, track width, all sorts of technical information like that. I'll put that on there. So it'll kind of be like a one source information for just build stuff for Wratchet. So what I tried to do on this is break it down. I've got, you know, chassis, engine, transaxle, front suspension, rear suspension. I was just trying to categorize it a little bit. This is as complete as I can get it. There's obviously stuff on here that's going to be missing, and then real intricate things like nuts and bolts and just wire, things like that, they're not on here. So when you're looking at this, this has probably 80%, maybe 90% of the parts on here, but there's a lot of stuff that's not on here, especially the small little pieces. But I would say this cost breakdown is probably 90% of the way. So in the chassis, I've got the Bentech Pro software in there, because honestly, if you really wanted to replicate this, that would be the best way to go, because I designed it in the Bentech. And then I've got things like tubing, aluminum for the skid plates, rivet nuts. I've got some nuts and bolts in there. I've got things like the mirrors, the seats, the brake pedal assembly, master cylinders. I put $700 in there just for miscellaneous brake hardware, things like fittings, brake lines, blah, blah, blah. That brings the chassis in at $3,882. And then I've got engine and transaxle. And the engine is in there at $175, and that is legit. That's because the engine in here, I just went to the boneyard, and you pick the engine that you want, and you pull it out, and for $175, you can get whatever engine you want. So that seems really, really low, but honest to God, at the junkyard by me, whatever engine you pick, it's $175. Then I've got the Weddle transaxle at $11,300. Quite a difference between the two. I built Wratchet from the get-go knowing I was going to spend big money on a serious transmission or a transaxle so that I could really push him to the limits. That's why that's so expensive. Then I've got things in there like the engine adapter, the clutch disc, the starter, just a lot of things that are specific for the engine and transaxle. Right now I've got all the drive shaft parts in there, but when I switch over to the CV axles, I'm going to take that stuff out and I'll put the part numbers and the costs for the CV axles in there. But so the engine and transaxle, I've got $13,739. Obviously most of that is the transaxle itself. Then I've got electronic fuel injection. This is basically the Infinity and the associated things that go with it. So I've got the Infinity computer itself, I've got the digital display, I've got fuel pump, pressure regulator, the fuel cell, temperature sensors, incoming air sensors, map sensors, O2 sensors, drive-by-wire, my 100 micron fuel filter, 30 micron, the cooling fans, my accelerator pedal, because since it's drive-by-wire, that's a specific part, and then relay kit. Obviously, there's things missing in there, but that's most of the cost. So that all comes in at $4,852. Then I've got front suspension. For this, I've just got, the shock absorbers, the springs with part numbers. I get a lot of emails asking me what springs I have and stuff like that. Part numbers for all of this stuff is in there. Bump stops, the hubs that I'm using with part numbers, those are nice. The rotors, the calipers, brake pads, the steering rack, and then all sorts of uniballs, heims, bungs, specific parts that I used on the front suspension. So there's actually a lot of specific parts for the suspension. That brings the front suspension to $3,752. Then rear suspension, same thing. I've got everything listed out specifically, including the hubs. That's a big one there. So the rear suspension came at $5,393. Wheels and tires, right now, wheels and tires on here are all just Craigslist junk that I bought. So that's coming in at only $420. I bought the Tacoma takeoff wheels for $300 off of Craigslist. And then the tires are used without much tread left. For $120, I got all four of the tires on Craigslist. I will eventually change to something nicer, but for now, that's what I have in the tires. For fiberglass and paint, these are all just estimations. I think they're pretty good. I came in at $2,500 for all of the fiberglass. Honestly, I think that's a little bit high. I don't actually think I paid that much. I mean, I would buy like $100 in fiberglass cloth, and I could make multiple molds and pieces off of that. The fiberglass cloth and the fiberglass mat actually wasn't that expensive. I know that I've bought gallons and gallons and gallons of resin and gel coat, but like a gallon of resin is like $40 and a gallon of gel coat is $50. So although I was buying a lot of that stuff, I honestly think my estimations here are a little bit high. But regardless, I got that at $2,500. Electrical, these are really rough costs here, but I've got the LED whips, my switch panels, the lithium battery, the light bar lights, the headlights, and the tail lights. That's all I have in there for that stuff. There would be probably some switches and some wiring, but I mean, there's not much more to it than that. That came in at $959. So if you add all of that up, you get, for what you see right here, $35,548. Remember, Mauler was a little bit over $15,000. However, there's a big difference between Mauler and Wratchet. Wratchet is stronger everywhere. He's a little bit bigger everywhere. And most importantly, he's got a transaxle that should be able to take damn near everything that this V6 can throw at. So that's it for this video, guys. I just wanted to get your ideas on some paint, tell you what colors I'm thinking about going with. Go ahead and give me your opinions on that, good or bad. I'm pretty dead set on those colors just because Wratchet kind of is, for me, a full-size radio-controlled car, so I think it makes sense that I'm pulled towards wanting to paint it like my radio-controlled cars. But I am going to try to dial it down so it's not too obnoxious, but let's be honest, you know, Wratchet's pretty obnoxious to begin with. And then give you the updates on the axles, which is pretty cool. I'm actually pretty excited to get those CVs going, but at this point, I feel like I won't be running on the CVs until like next spring if the parts are that far out, but we'll see how that goes. Thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope it's entertaining you or helping you with whatever you're working on, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.